Alright, so we're going to square both sides first. So 3x plus 7 equals, and again we have to FOIL the x minus 1. So we're going to write it twice. So we get x squared plus 2x plus 1. We're going to set it to 0. So we're going to subtract 3x and the 7 minus 3x and minus 7. So we get x squared minus 5x minus 6 equals 0. And we're going to factor that. So multiplies to negative 6 adds to negative 5. We're going to use negative 6 and positive 1. So we get x equals 6 and x equals negative 1. And then we need to check them. So we're going to do a check over here. So square root of 3 times 6 plus 7 equals 6 minus 1. So we're going to get the square root of 25 equals 5, which works. So x equals 6 works. And then we're going to check negative 1. So we get the square root of 4 equals negative 2, and that's not going to work. So that's extraneous. And if we look at the second one, we have to first move over the 5. So the square root of x plus 7 equals x minus 5. And now we're going to square both sides. And again, we have to write x minus 5 twice and FOIL it. So that's going to give us x squared minus 10x plus 25. And we're going to set it to 0. So we're going to move over the x and the 7. So x squared minus 11x plus 18 equals 0. We're going to factor to get x minus 9 and x minus 2 equals 0. So we get 9 and 2 as our answers. And then we have to check. We're going to do a check underneath. So square root of 9 plus 7 plus 5 equals 9. So square root of 16 plus 5. So 4 plus 5 equals 9. Correct? So 9 is good. And then we're going to check 2. So 2 plus 7 plus 5 equals 2. So square root of 9 plus 5 equals 2. 3 plus 5 does not equal 2. So x equals 2 is extraneous. And on this last one, again, we're going to isolate the 5x minus 4. So we get 5x minus 4 to the 1/2 equals x. And then we're going to square both sides. So we're going to get 5x minus 4 equals x squared. And then we're going to bring everything to one side to set it to 0. So x squared minus 5x plus 4 equals 0. And we're going to factor. Multiplies to 4 adds to negative 5. We're going to do x minus 4 and x minus 1. So we get x equals 4 and x equals 1. So now we're going to do a check. So we're going to do 5 times 4 minus 4 to the 1/2 minus 4 equals 0. So we get 16 to the 1/2 minus 4 equals 0. So 4 minus 4 equals 0. Check. So x equals 4 is good. And then we're going to do 5 times 1 minus 4 to the 1/2 minus 1 equals 0. So that's going to be 1 to the 1/2 minus 1. So 1 to the 1/2 is going to be 1. Minus 1 is 0, which checks out. So in this case, they both worked, and nothing is extraneous here. So what happens when you have two radical expressions? You're going to isolate the more complex one. So in this example, we want the larger radical, so the square root of 5x plus 4, to be isolated. So we're going to move the square root of x over. So we're going to rewrite this as the square root of 5x plus 4 equals the square root of x plus 4. So what we're going to do, again, is now we're going to square both sides. So when we square the left side, we get 5x plus 4. And when we square the right-hand side, we have to write it twice and FOIL it. So when we go to FOIL, square root of x and square root of x is x. Square root of x and 4 is 4 square root of x. 4 square and square root of x is 4 square root of x. And then 4 times 4 is 16. So we're going to end up getting x plus 8 radical x plus 16. Now, we still have radical in the problem, so now we want to isolate the radical again. So first we isolated the more complex radical, then we ended up with another radical in our answer. So now we're going to isolate that radical. So we're going to minus the x and minus the 16. So now we get 4x minus 12 equals 8 radical x. So now what we're going to do is we're going to square both sides. So we're going to square the left and square the right. When we square 4x minus 12, again we have to write it twice. So 4x minus 12 and 4x minus 12. So we're going to FOIL that out. Once we FOIL it out, okay, we're going to get 16x squared minus 96x plus 144. When we square 8 radical x times 8 radical x, we're going to get 64x. So now we want to bring the 64x to the other side. So that way we have one quadratic. So we're going to get 16x squared minus 160x plus 144 equals 0. Now from here, we can divide everything by 16. So now we have x squared minus 10x plus 9 equals 0. And then we can just factor. So multiplies to 9 and adds to negative 10. We're going to use x minus 9 and x minus 1. When we solve this, we get 9 and we get 1. And then we have to do our checks. So if we check 9 first, so we're going to do the square root of 5 times 9 plus 4 minus the square root of 9 equals 4. So this is going to give us the square root of 49 minus the square root of 9 equals 4. So 7 minus 3 equals 4. So x equals 9 is good. So now we have to check x equals 1. So we're going to do the square root of 5 times 1 plus 4 minus square root of 1 equals 4. So square root of 9 minus square root of 1 equals 4. So 3 minus 1 does not equal 4. So x equals 1 is extraneous. So now we're going to, on the first one, square both sides. So we get 2x equals x plus 5. And then we just solve, and x equals 5. Okay, so now in the second one, we have two radicals, so just add one of them over. And then we get the square root of 3x plus 2 equals the square root of 2x plus 7. So we're going to square both sides. So 3x plus 2 equals 2x plus 7. And then when we go to solve this, x equals 5. Okay, and in the last one, we're going to add one of these radicals over. So you get the square root of 3x plus 1 equals 2 plus radical x plus 1. Now we're going to square both sides. When you go to square the left side, you just get 3x plus 1. When you square the right-hand side, 2 plus radical x plus 1 2 plus radical x plus 1 times 2 plus radical x plus 1. We're going to FOIL this, so that's 4 plus 2 radical x plus 1 plus 2 radical x plus 1 plus x plus 1. So now we can combine our like terms. So this is going to be 4 plus 4 radical x plus 1 plus x plus 1. And then we can actually add the 4 and the 1. So when we go to write this, we're going to have 5 plus x plus 4 radical x plus 1. So now we're trying to isolate that radical again. So we're going to subtract the 5 and the x. So now we get 2x minus 4 equals 4 square root of x plus 1. So from here, we're going to square both sides. So the 2x minus 4, we have to write twice and FOIL it. So that's going to end up being 4x squared minus 16x plus 16. And then when we square the other side, we're going to get 16 times x plus 1. We're going to distribute that. So we're going to get 4x squared minus 16x plus 16 equals 16x plus 16. So now we're going to bring everything to one side. So we're going to minus the 16x minus the 16. So we end up with 4x squared minus 32x equals 0. So now we can divide everything by 4. So now we get x squared minus 8x equals 0. Factor out the x. So you have x minus 8 equals 0. So you get x equals 0 and x equals 8. So now we have to check. So we're going to check each one in the original. So square root of 3 times 0 plus 1 minus square root of 0 plus 1 equals 2. So this is going to be the square root of 1 minus the square root of 1. So 1 minus 1 does not equal 2. So 0 doesn't work. And then we're going to check the 8. So 3 times 8 plus 1 minus the square root of 8 plus 1 equals 2. So it's going to be the square root of 25 minus the square root of 9. So 5 minus 3 equals 2, and that does work. So x equals 8 is our answer.